Dear friends, the DigiU ecosystem is here. CEO of the project, Alexey Ognev. Today with us we have Alexander I, CSPO of the project. And now we are going to talk about the Venture Capital Fund. As you know, the Venture Capital Fund has always been an essential part of the DigiU ecosystem. And the focus of this Venture Capital Fund has always been internal. We developed our own projects and attracted projects into the ecosystem. And over time, with an understanding of the market, we realized that the focus should be both internal and external. With this in mind, we have started to explore this area, how we can develop our own venture capital fund externally. That's what Alexander and I are going to talk about today. For several months now, we have been talking about the idea of external development. And today, Alexander will share how this idea came about and why it is important now for the DigiU ecosystem. Alexander, I pass the floor to you. Welcome, and let's talk about it. Hello, everyone. Yes, the idea of a venture capital fund is not new. We have been talking about it for more than a year and a half now. And of course, we realize that we will not be able to develop everything ourselves. The speed of development is such that we don't have enough time, human or management resources to do it. Therefore, we are certainly interested in attracting and funding those projects that would strengthen our ecosystem, that could fit there and integrate with other projects. And each project would be a separate product in itself, like Eywa, but at the same time would be a brick or a foundation or sometimes a roof or a window in the house we are building on the way to the digital identity, to the meta-universe. Of course, we have had this understanding for a long time, and the further we develop, the more we communicate with large operating venture capital funds that have been in the global market for a long time. From Silicon Valley, Dubai, some European countries, China, Singapore, Russia, the CIS countries, and so on. Now we understand how this market works, its culture and features which were previously unavailable to us, and they are unlikely to seem obvious to most people, even those who think they understand how this market works. How did we understand how this works? In addition to talking to venture capital funds about funding and strategic support for the Eywa project, we also talk about the fact that an ecosystem venture capital fund will be set up, at least for the Eywa project. Eywa is an infrastructure project, and Eywa will have a venture capital fund that will invest, help projects, provide support in the form of introductions to other projects, funds, contractors, auditors, and so on, in order for these projects to operate on the Eywa protocol and thereby increase the number of users, number of transactions, turnover, TVL, total value locked, which is the amount of blocked funds in the Eywa project. Of course, there are many funds that have shown interest not only in investing in Eywa, but also in investing in our ecosystem venture capital fund, either in terms of their financial participation or in terms of doing analytics together, selecting projects, helping them together, and discussing them, because we have quite a lot of expertise in this process. I think it is deeper than in many venture capital funds, because there are mostly people with an economic mindset, or so-called businessman. And often, you need technical expertise to analyze whether the project is viable or not. And we have this expertise. Thus, we have come to the understanding that the venture capital fund should be aimed at the broad market. And the more precise understanding of how our venture capital fund will work, I believe, is emerging right now. Before we move on to the question of how a venture capital fund would work, you said in our conversations and in the webinar that while studying this market, you were able to see some structures of how these venture capital funds work that were not obvious before. Maybe you can share the most interesting ones with our audience. How do they work and why do they work that way? Of course, I will share my insights, what was new to me and what I have learned along the way. Let's start with the classic venture capital funds. Let's not define them too much, just separate them from cryptocurrency funds, which invest only in crypto projects. Classic venture capital funds that invest in biotechnology, in the IT sector, or in some other technologies, they have a planning horizon of 5, 7, or even 10 years. And there are huge risks along the way for the venture capital fund. The earlier the stage of the project, the higher that risk is. And there are specifics to the screening and selection of the project. And how do these venture capital funds work? First, a certain amount of money is raised, for example, $100 million, and then they say, Andreessen Horowitz has launched $100 million fund for 7 years, just as an example. And this fund has its own investment memorandum. In other words, they specify under what conditions, in what projects, and in what sectors this fund invests specifically. For example, Andreessen Horowitz may have another $500 million fund that will invest in the cryptocurrency sector, and another $300 million fund that will invest in biotechnology. And they may have different timelines and different investment memorandums. That is the first feature. The second thing is that I thought these venture capital funds worked like this. They collect all the money at once, for example, $100 million, and it stays in the account. And at any moment, they make something out of it. No, that's not exactly how it works. There are commitments from investors. Every venture capital fund has investors. As a rule, there are a number of big investors. For example, 5 people or 5 companies guarantee that they will each invest $20 million over 7 years. And when there is an investment committee that reviews a project and says that funds need to be transferred to that project, then those funds are transferred. As a rule, there is some reserve anyway, but it's not like that. $100 million stays for 7 years while the investment is going on. No, that's not how it works. At first glance, it seems logical, but it wasn't obvious to me. It was new. I wondered, how does this work? So, the money just lies unused and doesn't work for 7 years? That's some kind of strange story. In fact, that's not the case. The third moment, we will now touch on the cryptocurrency market, among other things, because we believe that cryptocurrencies are closer to people. They give people the opportunity to touch investments in these sectors, in these areas, in high-tech projects. Now, there are a lot of pools or community funds that come together and pool $100 or $1,000, some small checks, and they can invest a significant amount of money, $100, $200 or $500,000 at an early stage on a private round in some crypto project. There are a huge number of such pools now. At least 6 months ago, there were a lot of them. They react very quickly to the market. Now there has been a correction, a downturn in this market. These are the same people who participate in various IDOs. As a rule, These are people with small checks. But on the whole, it's an opportunity to get into the private round of some interesting projects. But there is no investment memorandum there. We know a number of such pools. There are questions about the screening of the projects and how they select them. In my opinion, it has more of a hype element. I'm probably going to say a lot of new words today. For example, a flipper strategy. It means to get in quickly and get out quickly, with maximum access. And this flipper strategy is the dream of any hamster in the cryptocurrency market. There will be less and less of such thing. There is already less of that. And I think there will be even less. That is to say, this market is becoming more civilized and more efficient. Although there is still a lot of rubbish, or, in simple terms, copying other projects with the aim of collecting money and not developing anything at all. So, these pools still bring huge benefits because they create mass adoption, which means that more and more people start participating in the process. And in fact, large venture capital funds are essentially the same pools, only where it's not 1,000 people who contribute $100, but 5 people who contribute $20 million or $50 million. That is the difference. Explaining to 5 people that we are investing in this project and negotiating with them is much easier. And, as a rule, those people who have that much money, they are ready and they understand that they are investing for 7 years. They have a certain strategy, and it's better for projects and it's better for funds. It's more stable and it's more clear. It is such a mature market, and it has been formed by trial and error over a long or very long period of time. And now, the cryptocurrency venture capital market is taking the best of the classic market, and the classic market is trying to take the best of the cryptocurrency market. That is, the timing of investments is getting shorter. The return on investments is starting to happen earlier in cryptocurrency projects. In cryptocurrency projects, it is difficult to lose everything to zero. And in classic venture capital investments, the investment can turn to zero. It is unlikely that in a crypto project, a token will become worth zero entirely, if there has been at least a more or less good screening or some kind of initial review. This is the third thing. How did we know? It was also surprising. There are so-called funds of funds. For example, there is a fund through which Abu Dhabi, South Korea, Bahrain, or other Arab countries' government funds invest in the cryptocurrency market. There are not only Arabic ones, there are others too. But the Arabic ones are an example, because we are familiar with them, and we communicate with them too. This fund receives money from these 6 state funds, but it invests directly in projects only 20% itself. It selects the project itself, analyzes them, but most of it, so 80%, it invests through another 20 large top venture capital funds. And in this way, the funds invest in each other. And what does that mean? You could say that they share responsibility with each other. That is, one fund, for example, trusts the other one to carry out project selection, to find projects, and to help the project to become quite successful in the future. That is, it is one thing to invest, but a normal good strategic investor who invests large sums and good venture capital funds, they help with more than just money. There is a lot of money in the world now, but projects don't take it. All projects need smart money. In addition to money, something else is needed. Introductions to the top players in this market, or some possible collaborations. For example, the Eywa project, in addition to financing, will need initial liquidity when it launches. We are thinking about that now and are in negotiations. And the strategic partners are willing to provide that liquidity so that Eywa launches, and there are already several $1 million lying in liquidity, so that people can exchange hundreds of thousands of dollars from different blockchains. This is the fourth thing, that there are funds of funds, and the funds invest some of their capital in each other. I have probably covered the most important things. If anything else comes to mind, I will add to it. This was very valuable information, and I will point out to our viewers that this information is from the front line of venture capital financing. If you hear this experience anywhere else, it will be very rare. So appreciate and learn from what we share in interviews like this. Given what you have learned, given the experience you have gained, and what you have now told us about these 4 features, what venture capital fund structure are you leaning towards for the DigiU ecosystem? And what are the best things to take from there and apply to us? I understand the question. The question is actually a complicated one, because we are not forcing the launch of a venture capital fund, but we are thinking about launching a venture capital fund as a separate product of the ecosystem. Because there are a number of issues in this area that require some kind of solution or some kind of choice. Because one or the other solution has both advantages and disadvantages. For example, we have venture capital funds and large investors willing to invest in our venture capital fund. And theoretically, yes, we could take 10 investors for $1 million each, and our venture capital fund will launch. Or, on the other hand, we could allow a large number of people to invest, to become a source of funding for our venture capital fund. In terms of ease of managing this fund, in explaining some things, of course, the first option is easier, because, as a rule, these are people who don't even need to explain anything. They want to do it themselves and are interested in it. That is, they leave the selection, expertise and development of the project to us. But at the same time, in our concept, we aim for technology to work for the benefit of people and for ordinary people to make money from it. And from this point of view, of course, we would like to have the maximum number of investors in our venture capital fund. This is one thing. Secondly, if you have a large number of investors, these investors are interested in ensuring that the products and projects in which we invest develop, and these same people may become the first users of the products. For example, there are other crypto projects investing in Eywa private round, which either want to integrate with the project when it goes mainnet, or they have a need, for example, to move liquidity from one blockchain to another blockchain, which means they use the product themselves. Also, our investors, ordinary people, can be the first users of the projects in which we invest. This is certainly a plus too. Next, cool projects don't really like taking money from community funds or pools. Why? Because, as I said before, there are flippers. And as a rule, at the current stage of the market, there are people in pools and in community funds who want to buy as cheaply as possible and sell the token as quickly as possible when it launches. That is, they don't care at all about how the project develops, and the planning horizon in these cases is a few months. Long term is definitely not a winning strategy for them. Yes, it was possible to make a very good profit like that a few months ago. But if we are talking about serious long-term plans, about building serious stable capital, in our view, this strategy is not suitable. If a project realizes that it is dealing with a community fund, these questions are, of course, asked. That is, not only do we tell venture funds about our project, how we create it and answer their questions, but we also ask investors, are we ready to take this investor to ourselves? For example, we don't take community funds now, or very rarely, only those we know personally who assure us that they will not sell tokens as soon as they have the opportunity. These will be investors who are focused on the long-term development of the project. These are the kind of investors that are needed in the private round. Why then give them allocation at a cheap price if they just want to sell it at the first opportunity? No. Private round is exactly where strategic investors are going to be. At least it should be like that. Unfortunately, this is not always the case in today's world. And the worse the project, the more it wants to just take any money, no matter who gives it. The better the project, the more they tend to give up that kind of money. And, accordingly, it's not a winning position for us if we say that we are a community fund. Because right from the start, we will have to explain that we are not flippers, that we are willing to help the project long term. This is disadvantage. Well, what other questions could there be? There is, for example, the Eywa product. And Eywa itself is an ecosystem, a blockchain ecosystem, or you can call it cross-chain ecosystem. Yes, it is part of the DigiU, but at the same time, Eywa itself is a huge ecosystem that should have a venture capital fund. And it will, according to the project development strategy, the Eywa Ecosystem Venture Capital Fund, or it may have a different name. We are also talking about the DigiU Ecosystem VC Fund. The question arises here, will these be different funds, or will it be one fund with an investment memorandum aimed at both the development of the DigiU and the development of the Eywa ecosystem? That is also a question. There are also different approaches to fundraising. There are pools that raise funds for each individual project. This is an additional management activity. What if you haven't raised any money, but the project has already been promised that it will invest? There are a lot of issues here too. Here I can say that we are certainly not ready to go that way. I am probably leaning towards some kind of compromise solution here. It's not certain yet, and it's not a final statement, it's not a final decision. But as a possible option, it will be a fund for a certain period of time. For example, for 3, 4, or maybe 5 years, for some relatively long period. For the classic venture capital market, 3 years is not enough. But for flippers who want to make access in 3 months, it's quite a lot. And most likely, it will be some other category of investors, including classic venture capital funds that could be investors in our one. That is, a fund with its own investment memorandum. When we decide whether Eywa and DigiU will have different funds, things will also become clear. But for now, we are still inclined towards the idea that it will be one fund. Then, it will be necessary to understand its strategy, which will be outlined in the investment memorandum. That is, the rules of the game by which this fund will play over these 3 or 4 years. Next, financing. Yes, we are probably ready to split these payments, so that not all of the money ends up in the fund at once, because they are not needed all at once. If we plan a fund, for example, for 3 years, and it's launched for $10 million, it doesn't mean that they need it immediately in the first month. We will not invest 10 million at once in the first month. In the first month, we will analyze, and in the second month, we will invest in one project. For example, $100,000, in another 300, and in another 50, and so on. And these investments will be broken down into timelines. It will be similar to an installment plan with DigiU shares. It could be an installment payment, for example, for 5 payments every 2 months. This is just for an example. We will think about it. And it is likely to be a mixed fund. We will have both institutional money and community money. Institutional money from major investors or from big projects that want to integrate with us, or from some big international venture capital funds. And, of course, from our DigiU and Eywa communities. By the way, at the moment, the Eywa community is 300,000 people, maybe from someone else, their friends and so on. So far, this is how it looks like. It is difficult to be more specific right now. I think the specifics will come closer to the launch of the Eywa project in mainnet. Amazing, honestly. At the moment, we realize that perhaps within our community, this product will also not be for everyone. It might not be understood by everyone. Surely there will be a threshold of entry to this project, right? And now, listening to this interview, all investors, partners, still have time to prepare, to study the unfamiliar words that Alexander just said, to study the market, the field in which we do business, and in which you plan to do yours, to make money or to develop. And you still have time before the final launch of this product. I think we will go live with this topic more than once. And we will write posts on this topic. And we will do similar interviews too. Maybe we will introduce products or projects that will be the first to enter our ecosystem in this way. I would like to add a little bit. There was a period when there were 5 or 6 projects a day contacting us. Now, of course, it's a little less because of certain geopolitical events. In general, our focus is a bit off now, because launching the Eywa project requires a huge amount of effort. We work 12 hours a day, sometimes with no days off. Also, part of the team is now in Dubai. I will be there too, and so will Alexei. But Eywa had already started work at the first conference yesterday, where we planned to take part. I would also look at it from a different perspective. We talked about the fact that other venture capital funds can invest through our venture capital fund too. This confirms that the funds are investing through other funds. But, on the other hand, this also opens up opportunities for us to invest in those projects where big international venture capital funds are investing too. Because it's not only us who receive projects, but also them. And they also screen them, they also carry out their own analysis, they also provide them with their support. In other words, it's a collaboration. The venture capital market is very small. Everyone knows each other through a handshake or two. Reputation is very important here. If you said that I wouldn't sell tokens, and when they unlocked you sold them, that rumor will definitely spread through the market, and proper projects won't take any money from you. There are a lot of nuances here. But it is an opportunity to invest with big venture capital funds. And the further we go, the more surprised we get. What seemed out of reach for us is now one step away, one handshake away. If we need to meet someone, communicate with someone, there are people who can introduce us. The only thing is that you have to be seriously prepared to go there, to have something to show, to have traction, to have some successes, some completed roadmap. So I think in this way we open up the opportunity for a lot of people to invest with big venture capital funds. I think this is very cool. Even 6 months ago, we had no idea how awesome it would be to make this happen. So I think this is something to be proud of. We are not bragging about this story. We continue to mark systematically, to work through all these issues. It might make sense, by the way, to make a page in the personal account where you can leave a pre-application form with an indication of the amount and period as well. And then we will realize how much people understand our product, what the financial possibilities are, what the audience is now. And we will already know the approximate potential in terms of the amount at the start. There is an image and reputation story here. When you say, for example, I have a $50 million fund, of course, projects and other funds are more willing to negotiate with you. The minimum amount of money that more or less serious guys would talk to you is $5 million. This is the starting point. We can say that some school kids came to play around. 50 is already serious. It's not the biggest figure though. 100, 200, 300, even $500 million. Ecosystem funds of various blockchain funds receive investments of $300 million for the development of their ecosystem alone. Andreessen Horowitz is launching billion-dollar funds, but 50 is generally good. You can already do something about it. Even if the first fund is closed and it has its own investment memorandum, it doesn't mean that its second fund with a different investment memorandum, with a different strategy, cannot start operating at the same time. I am not excluding this option, because each step we learn more about this market, we become more experienced, we have more contacts and more opportunities. You know, it can be compared to when people play, for example, computer games. There is a strategy game called Heroes of Might and Magic, which is my favorite game as a kid. There is a closed black map, and open a little circle around the castle where the hero is standing. And when he runs, the space opens up and it becomes more visible. We are in about the same state right now. And until you take those steps, you don't see more possibilities here. You don't see that there is a, for example, gold mine standing here. There is just a forest, or there is a monster standing here, or there are mountains to go around. So I urge everyone to act, because we are acting. Not everything happens as easily or as smoothly as it could have done. Of course, there are still various external events and geopolitics affecting in ways we didn't anticipate. But so far, we see that it is a working strategy, and it's only getting better. We are getting stronger. We are getting serious, more ambitious, more mature to some extent, and I think we'll realize all our plans. Alexander, this is a very inspiring speech, and especially that comparison about the computer game. And I fully agree with what was said. In terms of implementing the idea in the personal account, I completely agree too. Because when we first started writing posts on this topic, as soon as we started about the new product, we received a lot of positive feedback both in channels and in chat rooms, and in tech support as well. Everywhere our partners are asking about it. I think by the time this interview comes out, or in the near future, we will implement this application form. We will work through these questions and issues that are important for you to understand the reaction of our community, and that will be understood by our community. I want to say thank you for this interview. It was comprehensive and clear, in my opinion. I encourage everyone to follow our social media and share this interview. It will be available in several languages, and all partners will be able to study it in detail and enrich their knowledge of the current state of the venture capital market. Thank you, Alexander. Goodbye to everyone, and have a good day. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, and all the best.